So I want to address Chris Ship's coverage of Harry and Meghan over the years. And as many of you would know, his coverage has had a really skeptical quality that is very fair to acknowledge. He is not a Sussex cheerleader. He has never been. So the fact that he got the exclusive on Harry's Kyiv arrival and a face-to-face interview, I think is genuinely newsworthy, and it's genuinely worth discussing. As many of you may know, he is ITV's royal correspondent. And he's an odd one. I've always found him odd, and I tell you why. Because he has this persona of being reasonable, being measured, just doing his job. But he never fails to insert a bit of snark into anything that he's doing. So he would always, I believe in, and this is just my opinion here, this is someone who is always going to prioritize palace briefings over anything else. And he will always believe the palace briefings regardless of the evidence that is presented in front of him. And I think, and many people also think this, that probably the reason why Harry decided to give ITV this exclusive, considering that ITV, they platformed the most horrible and virulent attackers of Meghan on their program. So the guy whose name rhymes with Smearsporgan was one of them. Eamon Holmes was another. The Rotten guy was one. And remember, it was ITV that platformed Tom Bower with his, Mr. Yuckmouth man, with his book, the first book, don't know what that's called, don't care, and also the second book. But the second time, they seemed to, Ben Shepherd of This Morning held him to account and said, based on what you said and blah, 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 blah. So there was a bit of pushback for the second book of Tom Bower. So why am I saying all this? I'm saying all this because I think the decision to give ITV that interview is probably a very considered one. And somebody raised this point, and I think so too. It could be about the fact that Invictus Birmingham is next year and is probably part of the bigger picture, because Harry does need functioning relationships with some of the UK press if he's going to have any presence around those events. And as you know, whether the press is invited or not, they will crash the Invictus event. They will make sure they are there. So maybe Harry is thinking, better the devil you know, and if you're going to dine with the devil, you need a long spoon. So maybe his long spoon is testing, I don't know, again, this is just me theorizing, don't come for me. Maybe he is testing to see what Chris Ship or what ITV do with this bit of information about him going to Kyiv, see if it's leaked, see if they break embargo, maybe test them with this. Because remember, in ITV's coverage of Harry going to Kyiv, they kept saying, we didn't break any embargo, we kept the embargo, we got this. So it's like a schoolboy or a schoolgirl showing off, look at me, miss, I did so well, look at my drawing, you entrusted me to do something and I did it so well. There was a sense of that I felt from Chris Ship's coverage. And at the end of the day, giving an exclusive to an ITV's royal editor who has reach, and to be fair, ITV does have the reach into British audiences, and it does matter for Invictus awareness. So it could be that Harry was thinking this is a strategically sensible decision. Having said that, I believe ITV were supposed to show the last Invictus Games, and they did nothing. I think they put it online, but they put it online after like a couple of days. It was just so random, and people were actively asking, where can we see it? So imagine audiences literally wanting to see the games and ITV not doing much. And it was kind of like an own goal, because even things like advertising, clicks, engagement, people were ready to give them that. And yet ITV decided not to. So maybe, and again, this is me theorizing, don't come for me, maybe this is some of the media breaking away from palace narratives, because they're thinking, I know you're royal and we know, you are our bread and butter, but on the other hand, you're not giving us much to work with. And yet we have potentially somebody who can make our news go global, and they're coming to us with an opportunity. So maybe that's it. And I think that it could be a signal of the willingness to maybe engage with British broadcast media rather than only working through certain channels. We do not know. I'm just theorizing here. Also, I believe that giving a face-to-face interview is a way to manage the conversation for Harry, because a live conversation is much harder to misrepresent than a statement or a press release. Remember when Meghan gave a press release about her new products, the candles that she created to in honor of Mother's Day, and those candles were inspired by her children. And she used their full titles in a press statement, as she is entitled to do. And yet they went nuts. They said, oh my God, their titles are being merged. It's all over her website, only for people to check and see that it wasn't. So when you do a live interview, there is less risk of misrepresentation. So Chris Shipp would also know that twisting a direct quote from an interview that he conducted himself carries a reputational risk for him personally. So basically, if you misrepresent Harry, he could come for you personally. There's that possibility. So the accountability, I believe, runs both ways in that format. I would also want to add a third point. Yes, Ukraine is a subject where I feel Chris Shipp's personal journalistic instincts and Harry's genuine commitment, I feel they align. Because I have seen Chris Shipp occasionally break out from that royal correspondent box to do politics. And when he does mainstream news, he's actually in his element. So personally for him and professionally for him, this is a great thing for him to do, because, the Ukraine conflict, it kind of straddles that governmental, political, royal, Venn diagram thing. And that is where he gets the most excited. So I feel that Chris Shipp sometimes tries to place himself slightly above the fray, slightly above the, I'm not just another rotor rat. I've got more to me than being a yes man to the palace. Again, I'm just theorizing here, just my theory. So I believe him reporting on what Harry did in Ukraine is serious news. That is not about X made me cry. It's not about dark nail polish. It's not about avocados. It's not about, oh my God, Meghan blinked too much. She held her bum too much. It is not trivial stuff. It is serious news. And Harry in Kyiv at a security conference in Bucha, walking a minefield with a Halo Trust, that is a legitimate major story, regardless of how he might feel about the Sussexes personally. And at the end of the day, Chris Shipp is a journalist, and this is news. So I think the relationship is probably transactional and professional rather than warm. Harry's body language when he was being interviewed by Chris wasn't exactly inviting, but it wasn't exactly hostile either. It was kind of like, you stay over there, I stay over here, and I answer your question to the best of my ability. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, please. My name's Elizabeth. I'm the author of The Luxpreneur. And for more insights like these, please like, share, comment, and hit the subscribe button, please. And to support my work in holding truth to power, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Elizabeth Solaru, or you can get a copy of my book, The Luxpreneur, from Amazon, Waterstones, or Barnes & Noble.
Why Chris Shipp got the Sussex exclusive. Despite past scepticism, Chris Shipp's coverage of Harry and Meghan over the years has had a sceptical quality that is fair to acknowledge. He is not a Sussex cheerleader and has not been, so the fact that he got the exclusive on Harry's Kiev arrival and a face-to-face interview is genuinely noteworthy. The speculation about ITV possibly wanting to officially cover the Invictus Games in Birmingham next year is plausible and probably part of the picture. Harry needs functioning relationships with UK press if he's going to have any presence around those events, and giving an exclusive to ITV's royal editor, who has reach into British audiences that matter for Invictus awareness, is a strategically sensible decision that signals a willingness to engage with mainstream British broadcast media rather than only working through friendly outlets or his own channels. The face-to-face interview point is also legitimate. A live conversation is considerably harder to misrepresent than a statement or a press release, and Shipp would know that twisting a direct quote from an interview he conducted himself carries reputational risk for him personally, so the accountability runs both ways in that format. I would add a third factor. Ukraine is a subject where Shipp's personal journalistic instincts and Harry's genuine commitment happen to align, because this is serious news. Harry in Kiev, at a security conference in Bucha, walking a minefield with the Halo Trust, is a legitimate major story regardless of how you feel about the Sussex situation. And Shipp is a journalist, and this is undeniably news. The relationship is probably transactional and professional rather than warm, but sometimes that is exactly what is needed. Shipp's track record with the Sussexes. Shipp's history with Harry and Meghan is worth pausing on because it matters for understanding why this exclusive is significant. He has maintained a sceptical approach to covering the Sussexes over the years, fair but notably critical when the situation warranted it. He is not known as a Sussex cheerleader or a sympathetic commentator willing to soften edges for the sake of access. His reporting has had an edge to it, a willingness to ask uncomfortable questions and reflect the perspective of audience who have grown weary of the Sussex narrative. So the fact that Harry sat down with him, of all people, is genuinely noteworthy. This was not a friendly outlet being rewarded. This was a calculated decision to engage with someone whose coverage has not always been favourable, which suggests a level of pragmatism that is worth noting. Strategic value of ITV partnership. The speculation about ITV possibly wanting to officially cover the Invictus Games in Birmingham next year is plausible and probably part of the picture. Harry needs functioning relationships with UK press if he is going to have any presence around those events. Giving an exclusive to ITV's royal editor, who has reach into British audiences that matter for Invictus awareness, is a strategically sensible decision. It signals a willingness to engage with mainstream British broadcast media rather than only working through friendly outlets or his own channels. Competitive advantage of exclusive access. The face-to-face interview point is also legitimate. A live conversation is considerably harder to misrepresent than a statement or a press release. Shipp would know that twisting a direct quote from an interview he conducted himself carries reputational risk for him personally. The accountability runs both ways in that format. Professional accountability in live format. Shipp's credibility as ITV's royal editor depends fundamentally on his accurate representation of the interview itself, and that creates a structural constraint that benefits both parties. Twisting quotes from a face-to-face conversation he personally conducted would damage his journalistic reputation in a way that mischaracterizing a written statement simply would not. There is a different order of professional accountability when you are sitting across from someone with a camera recording. The live interview format creates natural safeguards against misrepresentation that do not exist with other forms of royal communication, which is precisely why it works as a mechanism for engagement, even when the underlying relationship is not built on trust or warmth. Legitimate news value of Ukraine coverage. I would add a third factor. Ukraine is a subject where Shipp's personal journalistic instincts and Harry's genuine commitment happen to align. This is serious news. Harry in Kiev at a security conference in Bucha, walking a minefield with the Halo Trust, is a legitimate major story, regardless of how you feel about the Sussex situation. Shipp is a journalist, and this is undeniably news. A prince visiting an active conflict zone, engaging with demining operations, and appearing at substantive security discussions carries inherent news value that transcends the usual Sussex media circus. Shipp would recognise that whatever his editorial stance on other Sussex matters, the story has weight independent of personal opinion, and that matters for someone with journalistic credibility to protect. When professional duty meets genuine commitment, Ukraine is serious news that transcends the usual Sussex coverage dynamics entirely. This is not a red carpet appearance or a lifestyle project that can be framed through the lens of palace politics. Shipp's professional standards as a journalist, his instinct for what constitutes a legitimately important story, happen to meet Harry's demonstrable commitment to this cause in a way that benefits both parties. For Shipp, covering a British royal at a security conference in Kiev, visiting Bucha, walking an active minefield with a demining charity, is simply doing his job at the level the story demands. For Harry, it is an opportunity to highlight work that matters to him in front of an audience that might not otherwise pay attention. Both men get to operate in a space where the story itself carries weight independent of their respective reputations, and that is perhaps the most functional basis for engagement they could possibly have. A professional alliance, built on mutual advantage. The relationship is probably transactional and professional rather than warm, but sometimes that is exactly what is needed. Strategic distance, not cosy affection, often makes for the most effective journalism. Shipp gets the access and the story. Harry gets serious coverage from a credible outlet with the audience he needs to reach. Both parties maintain their independence while achieving their respective goals. There is no pretense of friendship here, no blurring of lines. It is a clear-eyed exchange between two professionals who understand what the other brings to the table. That clarity, that lack of sentimentality, can actually produce better outcomes than relationships built on personal warmth but compromised editorial judgment.